I'm super excited to be here. Today will be less focused on specifically tools that I've made. From what I could gather on the internet about this working group, I felt like just a general introduction to how to make data visualizations in R might be the most beneficial for everyone in the room, rather than
Awesome.
teaching something like specific to phylogenomics. So that's what I ended up going with. And so today, yeah, we're gonna learn about how to make colorblind friendly and publication quality data visualizations in R. Again, really just the fundamentals. So, you might hear some things that resonate with you today. That's awesome. If you hear one and take that with you forward, like to me, that's a success. And, if you hear some things that don't really resonate with you, then that's okay as well. But yeah, I hope you find at least one thing that does. So we can loop back to this later, but if you haven't, I think step number two is probably the most important. Step number three we'll loop back to at the workshop portion of it. But if you have not downloaded R, that would be something good to do during the short presentation segment. So as Emil noted, I have pretty wide interests. They're a little bit all over the place. One of which includes kind of making graphics in various forms. One of which is manifested as this Art for Earth initiative. And so it's really not necessarily about the stickers or the posters or whatever is being sold. It's really about an attempt to allow people to purchase with purpose because 100% of the profits from this store go towards global conservation efforts. So I made these like Andy Warhol styling portraits of different endangered species to raise awareness about their endangered status and in a very fantasized sense, kind of immortalize them by giving them a portrait. And see, these are different ones of the African wild dog, the blue whale, and the Galapagos penguin. As Emil noted, I'm also deeply interested in fungi. And so I've made portraits of various fungi, whether or not they are endangered or not, just because I think they're really rad. And I was super stoked when one of these images was asked to be the cover of Yeast magazine, wherein I got to write an accompanying piece about how this portrait of budding yeast was, in my eyes, a symbol of the arts and the sciences coming together, and how what they offer together is much more than what they offer alone. So beyond all of the kind science introduction remarks that Emil had made, I also have this like um, very amateur, very untrained art interest. But yeah, as Emil had noted, I do find the fungi super interesting to study. And the reason that I think they're so cool to study is for me, I view them as this like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kingdom, right? So across the many 2 to 5 million different fungal species that are out there, some of them from the perspective of human welfare are really awesome. We use them for food production. We use them in industrial fermentations to produce things like vitamins and pigments. We know them to be very beloved, outstanding model organisms. On the flip side, though, a lot of them have really negative impacts on human welfare, including the many plant pathogens, the many human pathogens that both Emil and I study. And in a warming world, the niche of these pathogens is thought to be expanding, even giving rise to new multi-drug resistant pathogens like Candida auris. And so I've taken a real genomics focused, genomics centric approach to studying these organisms. And while many tools out there exist, I felt like some could either be iterated and improved on, or some just straight up did not exist. And I wanted to build them so that, in my eyes, bioinformatics is for everyone. Bioinformatics is for, yeah, the whole community, and specifically conducting rigorous bioinformatics research is something that I want everyone to be able to do. So, yeah, I engineer a bunch of software for the life sciences, which are all publicly available, and you can see that more on my GitHub page. And today we'll even take a look at what has surprisingly become the most popular one, ggpubfigs, which is an extension from ggplot2 to make colorblind-friendly figures. Okay, so now the more workshop part of it all, there's going to be a real brief presentation, maybe 5 minutes or so. And then the workshop tutorial, I don't think it'll actually take 1.5 hours, but the whole goal was that it should take longer than we actually have time for so that you can go home, work on it some more. I'll provide all of the answers. all the materials that you need are right there. But it really won't take 1.5 hours. We'll just go till the time is up. Okay, so we're going to be talking about communication. We'll cover a lot of things you've already known. And then our other goal is that well, hopefully you'll be able to leave being able to make figures using R and ggplot. And of course, we can't cover everything, but my aim is to sort of provide you with a foundation, provide you with the fundamentals that you can go on and make figures from your own data. So when it comes to figures and communicating observations, um, I think these cave paintings are kind of like a cool example to talk about the depth of clarity in figures or in images. So this cave painting is of a mammoth and a bison. There's like sort of this outline of each one of these animals. Perhaps the bison is here, and I believe the mammoth is right here. But then there's other cave paintings out there that provide color when it actually like helps, and they provide a greater level of detail that kind of like makes the image of that bison sharper. And so both are aesthetically amazing. Both have extreme value. But what I'm kind of trying to bring to your attention is like let's not leave the viewer to interpret things when it comes to depicting scientific data. Let's kind of be as straight up and descriptive as we can in how we depict them, right? Let's include details where it's important, such as the horns of the bison, each individual appendage easily being able to be seen, the color, which is an important feature. Let's provide important details in our figures. Okay, right. So less assumptions are made by the viewer in the right one. In the scientific realm, there's a ton of examples that are out there. This is just one that I pulled from Plott's computational biology, where you could have this figure on the left, or you could have the one with a little bit richer information on the right, which kind of describes what these waves are, sine and cosine waves, as well as some important mathematical formulas with them too. So this would be like, yeah, the scientific equivalent. So I think that there are 5 guiding principles for how to improve figures. This is certainly a non-exhaustive list, but first off, it's important to know your tools, know what you're working with, know what's at your disposal. And so there's a whole bunch of tools to plot data. In Python, matplotlib is really popular. Seaborn is popular. Seaborn is basically a Python emulation of ggplot2. Circos for whole genome data, Cytoscape for networks, and of course R, and today ggplot2. A lot of these images can be exported as PNGs, JPEGs, or very importantly, SVGs, scalable vector graphics, where you can, without manipulating any of the data, sort of improve or enhance the aesthetic quality or the communicative value of the figures. So you can edit SVGs in things like GIMP and things like Inkscape. Affinity Designer is what I use, and then Adobe Illustrator, which is of course super, super popular. So we sprinted through a whole bunch of tools, and it's like, how do you choose which one is best for you? And this might honestly be guided by the message you're trying to convey and the underlying data, right? So if you're trying to convey a network, Cytoscape might be super friendly to you. If you're trying to depict a whole genome, Circos might be friendly to you. And then for just general plotting, Seaborn, Matplotlib, ggplot2, these are all great. Okay, and then point number 2, identify your message. So another common plot that we see in biology are these Manhattan plots. They communicate thousands and thousands of observations across the genome. But if you're trying to communicate like what this single peak here is, there's other ways to sort of bring visual attention to just this peak or just significant peaks via a Manhattan plot, as well as removing sort of extraneous information, which is shown on the bottom here. I think this could just be condensed into chromosomes along the x-axis. So there's this one that I think is much simpler, much nicer, much more descriptive, and gives the reader what they need, the key things, right? The line for significance, changing the color for the ones that are significant to this red that's really capturing the visual attention, and then adding that additional layer of information with the gene names there too. That's super helpful. And then just a very quick tour of different figures that you all know very well. If you're trying to show a correlation, these scatter plots with line trends are very helpful. They can even be kind of grouped by different categorical data, and we'll learn how to make some of these in R. There's also different ways to show correlations if there's a ton of different correlations that you're trying to depict, such as these heat maps. So here, dark blue is positive correlations, dark red are negative correlations, and then the size of the dot has to do typically with the absolute value of that correlation. Something that can also help be descriptive and tell the whole story of the data itself is to sort of add in these marginals. And I don't see this often, but I think it's pretty useful, and we'll learn how to make these marginal plots today. So it's basically a scatter plot in the middle with these histograms on the X and Y axis. There's, of course, many other ways to depict distributions as well as add in categories. And if you have very widely differing n values for your different categories, you can always plot density distributions. Sorry, I'm kind of just sprinting through this so that we have more time for the workshop portion. There's also, of course, box plots, very familiar to you. They don't really show the density of the distribution in a histogram or density plot kind of way. And so I really like violin plots because they help describe the underlying distribution, which isn't really captured in a box plot. When trying to show composition of things, pie charts can be very helpful, but it's hard to compare different sizes of different slices of the pie. So there's also different ways of doing it, which is just changing it to be a bar plot, which is also pretty helpful. There's a whole bunch of different styles of plots that are out there. And one thing that I really, really like that we'll go into a little bit is how to do principal component analysis, which is this like dimension reduction analysis, and how to plot for 3 different variables of data along PC1 and PC2. Okay, so the next thing is, yeah, being honest about the data. I've sort of like hinted at this multiple ways, saying, for example, box plots aren't the most descriptive of what's going on underneath the data. But it's all about not misleading the reviewer, not the reviewer, the viewer, and just making sure that that the data is speaking for itself. So I'm not going to say what news org posted this. It's not that important. What I really want to bring your attention to is how they plotted this line chart through the various months. And this strange 8.6, which looks the exact same as 9.8, and is somehow above the 8.8 over here. So if it were plotted correctly, it would actually kind of look like this big dip from October to November, in this case, an employment rate. That's one example. Others that I found on the internet that I thought were kind of just funny was, I mean, these are all pretty old now, but there was like this pie chart that had 70%, 60%, and 63%. So all added up to be way more than 100%. And then going back to the whole box plots don't really show the underlying data. This is a cool little animation that you might run into like so many different times in your life as a scientist. But these are all the same box plot, but the underlying distributions can change widely, but yet still have the same summary box plot of median, 25th, 75th quartile, as well as the whiskers. So there's something that's risen in popularity, and they're called these rain cloud plots, and they just kind of show it all rather than deciding for the viewer what to show. Okay, 2 last things. One of which is using color effectively. So one thing to consider is how to utilize contrast appropriately. Having adequate readability can be achieved by having high contrast. So bright white text against dark background, or light background against dark text. But if you have inadequate contrast, it can be really tough to read that text, such as in the lowercase, or if you have like a pretty distracting background. So I think this is partly why patterned backgrounds have kind of fallen out of favor. And then just like a very, very brief 101 on color theory. This is a color wheel, and it's how people kind of use it to navigate aesthetically pleasing colors, like what combinations of colors go well together. And the rule of thumb is basically pick uh, colors that are opposites on the color wheel. So blue and orange always go really well together because they are opposites on the color wheel. And then if you need a color scheme that has three colors, you just draw a triangle. So green, orange, and purple go really well together as a color combination. And that can work out really nicely. You might also remember green and purple is like a really famous color combination, kind of like because of the Hulk. And so it's a good color combination because they're nearly opposing opposites on the color wheel. Okay, and so if you need four colors, then you simply just draw a rectangle, and then you can more or less get four colors that would go well together aesthetically. But again, you might notice that orange and red are kind of low contrast, or they're really similar to one another, so it might be hard to tease them apart. So these are all a bunch of different things to consider. Um, and so we saw the rain cloud plot in my own work. I've really favored just picking a violin plot and a box plot together because I feel like that captures enough information about the underlying distribution as well as some of these summary statistics like median in the box plot and the 25th and 75th percentile. So I like these types of figures and tend to favor them. All right, so we're going to be working with R. There's a whole ton of different color palettes that are available in R. Some of them are, for gradients like yellow, orange to red, like those shown on top. Some of them are sort of like contrasting groups of colors, and then some of them are spectrums between two distinct colors, such as red and blue, or the rainbow spectrum, brown and this green or tealish color at the very bottom. And then some of them are colorblind friendly. Some of them already come out in ggplot too, so like dark 2 or in R color brewer, like dark 2 is one of them. That's a great color palette. Instead of having the user kind of putting the onus on the user to pick a colorblind friendly color palette, this was the whole motivation of why I engineered ggpubfigs. It's just so that all of these color palettes are colorblind friendly for most sort of types of color blindness. And so you don't really have to think about which ones are colorblind in this which ones are colorblind friendly in this package, which ones aren't. You just pick one, and it's probably going to work for your use case. And so ggpubfigs has been super helpful for me. It's also been helpful for others, which has been great to see, and maybe it'll be helpful for you. Okay, and the very, very last thing, something that I think everyone knows, is like, message before beauty. No need to over clutter or over complicate things. And so one example that I found of this was Pepto-Bismol basically plugging their product by showing a bunch of the foods that you might be eating that might warrant the use of Pepto-Bismol. For example, down here they have hot dogs, and against the backdrop of a hot dog, they have how many hot dogs were eaten during different eating competitions, where in 2009, someone ate 68 hot dogs. That's wild. But you can see like this is just too overstimulating, overdoing it on the graphics here. Whereas if you're in the business of making infographics, something a little bit more simpler with obvious chunks or like modules of information, as this one has, can be a little bit more communicative. I'm not saying that this is the pinnacle of how to make an infographic, but I do think it is an improvement compared to the last one, especially because there's an obvious title that sort of summarizes what we are even looking at. And above all, I think the most important thing is just kind of keep it simple. No need to overdo it unless it's called for. No need to overcomplicate. Just tell the crux of what you want the real message that you want, let that shine through in your figure. Okay, so with that, we'll go into the workshop portion. There's three goals: basic data examination, learn how to plot different numbers, different dimensions, et cetera, in a data set, and then just get the know-how on how to create figures for your data so that in your own research, whether you're in genomics, psychology, economics, whatever your field may be, you can make figures for your data. Okay, so to get the worksheet, you can go to jlsteenwyk.com, click the resources tabs, and then you'll see this bioinformatic tutorials written by Jacob L. Steenwyk at the top. And then on the right side, you'll see this Making Figures in R 2024 version of the workshop. So the answer sheet is not up there yet. I will put it on there in maybe like 10 minutes or so, but I just want people to sort of get going on the workshop, get going on the worksheet without any answers, and then I'll put it up. None of the questions are hard. This isn't me trying to trick you or make your life challenging. It's, again, the goal is just to give you the grounds for how to make some of these figures. And for those who are very, very familiar with R already, I've stuck challenges at the end that are, I think, harder and therefore hopefully more stimulating if you're already very familiar with working in this environment. Okay, so with that, we can get started.